And now, Move the Sticks with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Move the Sticks. DJ Buck with you. Buck, how you doing, man?
I'm good, DJ. It's the first time that you and I have gotten together since the draft and all the chaos. I got to commend you on the job that you did. I didn't get a chance to see it or hear it because we were working simultaneously, but the feedback that I got and the advice that you gave to one Shadur Sanders was much needed, evidently, after all the conversations post-draft that I heard.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and congrats to you. And I heard I got some of the number reports for all the stuff you guys were doing, and it was like crazy growth, man. So it's fun to see all the different ways we can kind of communicate with the masses during the draft, and to see just the entire thing just continue to grow and build is pretty cool. So I'm excited to catch up with you. And I've got one of the things I want to hit on, and we'll get to it in just a minute. But I wanted to hit on how, and we've seen this before, how your relationship and history with players at previous stops or years past in your organization informs your decisions on the guys you draft, because you think you've coached this type of player before. And so I got a list of players that I want to get your thoughts on. But we're going to get to that in just a minute. But first of all, it's time for Hot or Not, brought to you by Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage. So, I mean, look, we'll start there. We don't need to spend a ton of time on it. Everybody's said their piece. We both had a chance to say our thoughts on it. But the more time removed from the Shadur thing, the draft thing, my biggest takeaway, Buck, might be this will probably be, talk about teaching tape or what have you, but this is probably a reason why agents matter. Why you could say, if you were an agent, I would use this as a example of why you should hire an agent. And there's a reason why, Buck, that these training facilities make so much money, where they bring these kids in. It's not just to teach them how to run a 3-cone. Like, I think it's to kind of help you, guide you through the process. Cause I think that was where things kind of fell off track. That's how I looked at it.
Okay, so before we talk about Shadur, I want to use Jackson Dart as the example. And the reason why I want to use Jackson Dart as the example is during Super Bowl, we had an opportunity in the viewing room. Jackson Dart and his dad came through. Jackson Dart was sitting up beside us. He was asking questions and really wanted to dig into the process before. I think that was that
before the Senior Bowl.
It was before the Senior Bowl. So whatever we were watching, we were doing a Saturday games. And so he comes through, he does that. He has all the questions. He does all of that or whatever. And I don't know if you had a chance to see the phone call that Brian Dable and Joe Shane made to Jackson Dart. And one of the first things they said is like, man, you killed the process. You really crushed the process. Both guys said it individually to him about the process. And it was at that moment when I saw that, I was like, oh, that process is really everything. And maybe not even in my own naivete, because like we've all worked for teams or whatever, but in a different time, that process for quarterbacks is really unique and different. And then I went back and I had an opportunity to see the clips from Hard Knocks last year, where the Giants kind of went through the quarterback process with Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and all that. And they really gave access to how they go about it. And Joe, in that clip, talked about, look, this process that we feel like we've honed down has been very successful for us throughout the years, not only with the guys that we acquired, Josh Allen, when they went through the process in Buffalo, but the other guys who've killed this process, like a Jaden Daniels, they also had success in the league. And so what that led me to believe is, if you're a player, and let's just say Shadur didn't prepare to really crush this process, after watching how they go about it, there's no way you can fake your way through it. Like, it's not a process. Like, I want everyone to understand, this is not one where you can go to the class, not study the test, but like, hey, I'm gonna wing it. It's not one that you can do it. You really got to prepare. You really got to know the ins and outs. And it's not only about knowing your stuff, it's how do you articulate the game to others? How do you articulate your level of knowledge and those things in amid chaos in an interview session? So if you didn't take that part seriously, if you didn't approach this like you and I would say to our kids on a regular job, hey, when you go for a job interview, hey, wear your blue suit, make sure your shoes are polished, make sure you come in there, have you researched the company? Do you know who you're talking to? Have you researched them? Do you have all of the answers to be able to, like, a SWOT analysis test? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? How am I working to make those weaknesses my strengths, all of those things that we would tell. If you don't approach the NFL job interview like that, it'll come back and get you. And I think that's what we saw.
Yeah, and I think first of all, to correct the timeline, you're correct. I'm like going back in my head. So Senior Bowl would have been before the Super Bowl. So he had been through the Senior Bowl process. He came in, watched the Super Bowl, but I mean, he asked a bazillion questions about like when you're meeting with teams at the combine and when you're going through this process, and then at the pro day and at the workouts, like what are they looking for? What do I need to convey? What are the things you think I need to work on? Like there was some awareness there. And that's really probably the biggest thing is just the awareness. And I was going back through it and, we've seen in years past, because I think people will go, oh, we see all these top quarterbacks, they don't throw at the combine or they don't do this and that. And they kind of choose what they want to do. I'm like, you have to know where you, not just in how confident you are in your ability, but you have to know where your stock is. So Cam Ward, he was viewed as the top guy, and that gap just kept getting wider and wider. So Cam Ward didn't need to throw at the combine. Cam Ward didn't need to go to all-star games. Like Cam Ward was a made man, for lack of a better phrase. But when you look at the quarterbacks that went next, Buck, Jackson Dart, full process, Senior Bowl included. Tyler Shuck, full process, Senior Bowl included. Jalen Milroe, full process, Senior Bowl included. Dylan Gabriel, full process, Senior Bowl included. Like those guys knew that, hey, I'm not in that tier, so I got to do all the stuff along the way to get me, to have teams, want to pick me, because there's a difference between it's the love and the like. If teams love you, they're not going to be as demanding of the process. If teams like you, it is your job to make them love you. Does that make any sense? That's kind of where I was.
And I also think that everyone has to understand that there is a shift that's going on in the National Football League, not just with quarterbacks, but with all players. And I think we heard it repeatedly. We heard it on your telecast where they talked about guys are really going after players who really love ball. Yeah. Like DJ, think about how many times in the past we would say that, but there's a concerted effort by teams to make sure that the guys they acquire love ball. And I'm going to use the Jaguars as an example. One of the things that General Manager James Gladstone talked about when he first took the job is, hey, it's not about us setting the culture. It's us bringing in the players who change the culture just by being themselves. Yeah. And the way that they change the culture is they already have these things where they want to be great. They want to come to work. They want to do extra, all this. So DJ, what they did is people will tell you, and I'll tell you the story about Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter comes into the facility after being selected. He goes through and does all the stuff. And then he's looking to change clothes so he can go work out with the team. And they're like, no.
Can't do that yet.
You can't do that yet, but that's how he was. And then the other thing that came out, this because you were at the Senior Bowl. So Jack Kaiser, I didn't know this, but evidently during the game,
he had to switch back and play safety.
Everybody opted out. He's an inside linebacker by trade. But on game day, he was like, oh, cool, I'll go and play safety. And there was someone else who played on both sides or whatever, and they drafted him. And they said, we want guys who embrace all aspects of the process, even if it will put you in a position to not look at your best, to not look like you know what you're doing, because you love ball so much that you're like, hey, I'll do everything. And he talked about last year,
Braden Fisk.
I guess played on both.
He switched teams.
He played on both teams.
Yeah, he switched teams for the game.
And so DJ, so now when you have all those quarterbacks like Jalen Milroe and Tyler Shutt and Jack Dart, they're all going through the process and all willingly doing everything. You stick out like a sore thumb when you don't participate like that.
Yes.
And even though we are in a thing where everyone is celebrating the player empowerment era, you're empowered to do whatever you want to do. You can opt out or whatever. But I'm telling you now, it ain't like it used to be. They're judging on that. And some of the other guys, like a Will Johnson. Will Johnson elected not okay. But what they're doing is if they have somewhere where we can complete all the boxes and tie up all the loose ends, I'm going to take the prospect that I know everything about as opposed to the prospect that has some unknowns.
The one thing, because we talked about, obviously we tackled this subject from a lot of different areas on TV over the 3 days. And, try and be measured and reasonable and everything. And I try and give people a look inside when you've been inside those buildings and what that would look like. The only thing that I said that I got I didn't see all the feedback, but the one thing that was brought to my attention was some negative attention off what I said was at one point in time, I said, when he had kept sliding, I said, if I were advising him, what I would tell him was, of the teams you met with, now that's not all 32, but I would
Pick up the phone
call
and call him.
I would
Yeah.
call him and say, hey, something got miscommunicated through this. I want you to know that, like, I'm a football player and this is my desire and passion. I'm coming there to work. Like, this is not about, production value or any of this other stuff that you might associate with me. Like, I just want an opportunity. I will compete my butt off and I'm going to make us a better team. Let's start there. I'm going to earn everything. But and then people were like, yo, you're asking him, so you want him to call and beg teams? And I'm like, no. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if I went and interviewed for a job that I wanted, and then I heard, you know what, they didn't like some of the things you said in the interview, I don't think they're going to hire you. My first thing would be like, let me call. Hey, sir, I know in our conversation when I interviewed, maybe the way that didn't come across the right way, but I want to let you know that I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can. Like, I'm the right guy for this job. That's not begging for a job.
So
that's not lowering yourself. That's just trying to be proactive and show a commitment to make sure that we're on the same page. And at the end of the day, if you want to go somewhere else, that's fine. But I want you to have a proper understanding of what I'm about. That's all I was saying.
So a couple of things with that, because I saw that, and to me, it was sensible. It makes sense. If I want the job, go get the job. Like, that's one of the things, like, in civilian life, if you want a job during that interview, it's important for you to convey to the person interviewing you, I want this job. And if I get this job, here's how I'm going to perform in that job. And it's a way to not only display confidence, but also humility and saying, hey, I'm about the team. I'm this and that. That's also where lack of representation hurt them, because representation.
Because that's a person who could be having that conversation. Like, hey, I talked to this team and they said that you answered this question this way, and that rubbed them the wrong way. Be like, oh, let's put you guys on the phone together. Yeah.
We need to go clean that up. We need to get on the Zoom. We need to make sure that everyone clearly understands that part of it. The other thing that I did on TV, DJ, because then people talked about the fall and the slide and all of that stuff, but I was trying to let people know in the draft, what happens is you have the vertical board, you have the horizontal board. The horizontal board is the positions in order. What happens, DJ, if we are a team that doesn't need a quarterback, even though Shedeur is there, that doesn't change our process. And I know we can talk about best player available, but best player available is a thing that we use as we're checking off needs and those things. It's just not we're going willy-nilly and just taking random players at the top of the board that don't necessarily jive. And particularly when you're in the first 3 rounds, the guys that you take in the first 3 rounds are guys that we're projecting to be starters. So if I don't have an immediate need at quarterback, we can acknowledge that a player is worthy of doing that, but we're not seriously entertaining or considering that. There's a level of the draft where we get to that now we'll begin to consider, okay, look, we don't have the need, but this guy was rated as a 2nd-round player. He's now in the 5th round. Let's take him just from a value standpoint, which is what I believe the Browns got to. But I'm going to say this. It's really sticky in the Browns quarterback room just because of the pecking order. So when you take Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round, DJ, your 3rd round pick is on the team.
Yeah.
So we can sit here and talk about it's an open competition, but your 3rd round pick is on the team. So now this competition has become it's Shedeur versus
Shedeur and Pickett. Yeah.
That's the competition. So that's what it is. I think we've exhausted. We talked about this a lot, and I would rather, like, not being disrespectful to Shedeur, I'd rather talk about some of the other guys that had an
100%.
opportunity to do their thing, because that's what I mean. That I feel like the telecast became all about Sanders, and we just want to make sure that others get love for their opportunities to go. And the subject matter that you brought up.
Yep. That was this week's Hot or Not segment, brought to you by Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage. Store more and do more with your data. Try them for free at wasabi.com. All right, Buck. Let's take just a quick pause, and we'll come back, because I got some names I'm gonna run by you, and I want to get your thoughts on the comparisons with coaches or general managers that they had a previous player that might have informed their decisions. All right, Buck. First up, this one is an easy one. Pete Carroll, Ashton Genty. Stylistically, Marshawn Lynch, like, he appreciates that style and that brand of runner.
Absolutely. Look, DJ, it's one of those things. That was the easiest one to mock. When you're going through the mock and you're like, Raiders, Ashton Genty could be there. Would he do it? Yes. Why? Because this player gives him what he's always wanted, a workhorse runner who can do all the grimy stuff, but also as a factor in the passing game. And for people who really haven't been reminded of how good Marshawn Lynch was, it wasn't just beast mode running. There was a time there, DJ, whenever they needed a go-to play in the passing game, the ball went to Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah.
Like, that's how good he was. He was so good out of the backfield, first coming out of Cal, and then he goes into the league. And then when he gets to Seattle, man, they really tapped into that. To me, I believe Pete Carroll is kind of recreating some of that offense that he previously had in Seattle to help the Raiders get back on track and close the gap on their competitors. Aston Genty is the workhorse, the linchpin to that offense being able to kind of play that style.
Yeah, and they're going to be able to finish games with him too. I mean, think about all those games that Marshawn Lynch just kind of put away. Hey, they got a good defense. They've got a good front, I should say. They have some other pieces they need to fill in. But they, hey, if we can get out to a lead, he can salt the game away here. And Pete Carroll's always appreciated having somebody like that. All right, next one. There's two teams that hit this one. So I'm going to go with the Chicago Bears, okay? And then I'm going to come back with the New York Jets. They took Colston Loveland in Chicago, and they took Mason Taylor with the Jets. You had head coach for Chicago, Ben Johnson, who came from Detroit with Sam Laporta. Head coach, New York Jets. You had Aaron Glenn, who came from Detroit with Sam Laporta. I think Sam Laporta helped place both those guys in those teams, because I think you look at Loveland, you look at Mason Taylor, size, speed, stylistically, there's a lot of similarities to a guy like Sam Laporta.
That was the first thing that came up to me when I saw Loveland go over top of Tyler Warren. I was like, Ben Johnson was doing his evaluations, and he was like, man, Loveland reminds me a lot of Sam Laporta. I could do a lot of the same things I did with Laporta with him. And I'll be honest, DJ, I felt like he did the same thing with Luther Burden. I felt like Luther Burden was a bit of an Amon-Ra St. Brown pick. I felt like he said, oh, I can recreate the offense that I just had. I got all of these guys. I got an alpha dog competitor and slot receiver in Burden. And then I have Loveland, who can do all the stuff with Sam Laporta. I can set my quarterback up for success without really having to deviate too far from the system and the scheme and the way that I want to play, by now getting the personnel that I'm very familiar with and comfortable with from my time in Detroit.
And then last one for those teams, let's go Aaron Glenn, New York Jets. They decide with their first pick to take a big physical run blocking right tackle who isn't completely as polished in the pass game, but we're going to dominate physically and we're going to develop more as a pass protector. That remind you of anybody from Detroit?
Oh, maybe. Let's see. Penei Sewell, maybe. Maybe we'll take a big dude to anchor that offensive line and to give us what it is that we want to have in terms of as a team. We want to be a physical team. We eventually want to run the ball, we want to protect the quarterback and all those things. Man, it's funny because the conversation on Membu, DJ, I was getting feedback from some people like, man, I don't think he's that great. I'm not in love with him. From some of the people in the business, I was like,
yeah,
what?
I don't get that. No.
I was like, I definitely don't see that. Like, I see a really good player who can do a lot. And I think the Jets certainly saw that. And, man, having him anchor it down, you talk about a right tackle that can really get physical and establish it at the point of attack, it certainly works for them, and it worked for Detroit for a long time.
Yep. This one I don't agree with this comparison quite as much, but I understand what the goal is here. And that's with Tet McMillan and Mike Evans, trying to draw the connection with Dave Canales coming from Tampa.
Yeah, so it's funny that you brought it up, because I feel like the Tampa situation impacted two teams. It impacted the Carolina Panthers with Tet McMillan being the Mike Evans type, basically recreating that, right? So I can see Dave Canales looking and saying, okay, I got Tet McMillan over here. He is Mike Evans. I have Xavier Legette over here. He's going to be my Chris Godwin type. I got two big-bodied playmakers that can expand the strike zone for Bryce Young. I also believe down in Tampa, Emeka Egbuka gives them what they had. He's like, oh, I got someone that can be an easy replacement for either one of these guys. Presumably Mike Evans, if he doesn't resign after next year, they now have two big guys that they can play with, that they've always kind of operated with, that has really helped Baker Mayfield. So I do believe you're right. Everyone kind of has a blueprint that they prefer to follow, and that blueprint is established along the way, either with the player that they've come in contact with, or being in an organization and you had a lot of success operating a certain way.
Yeah, 100%. How about this one? Eamon Wari got picked in Seattle, and everybody was doing they got the new Cam Chancellor. And I'm sitting here going, well, no, Mike McDonald came from Baltimore, and he's got his Kyle Hamilton. Like he knows how to use that big player in that role, and it's
so good.
He's a kind of a faster version of Kyle Hamilton.
I mean, such a good fit, such a good pick. Not only that, because you're talking about Eamon Worry like kind of dropping in there, but how about John Snyder and those guys looking and seeing a bigger, faster Cam Chancellor and being like, oh, this kind of reminds me of we've had success in this model using this kind of player. Yeah, DJ, it works. I believe in, and I know people hate when we do the comparison things, but I'm telling you, every coach does this. This guy reminds me of this. This is what I'm gonna do with him. If he comes in, he's that. And when we are presenting a player to the coach and say, hey, coach, he kind of reminds us of the coach immediately said, oh, okay. This is the game plan for how we'll use a player that has that. This is what we did with him. We'll do the same things, and it'll work for him as well.
All right, this one was a fun one for me. Sean Payton goes and gets R.J. Harvey, which is his Darren Sproles.
Oh, yeah. Darren Sproles had a lot of success for the Saints. I mean, he was a very impactful player, and he was part of a deep rotation. They would mix him in. You couldn't cover him out the backfield. He was so explosive, also in the return game and all of that other stuff. He did a lot for them. Very underrated are his contributions to what that team was able to do down in New Orleans.
All right, I'm not saying that this player is as good as these players, but this is what I was told, and I knew the Cowboys were on the interior offensive lineman. So I thought there was a chance it could be a trade back and take Gray Zabel or Tyler Booker. They ended up kind of getting stuck there, and then it just taken Booker. But what was told to me after the fact was in their meetings and in their conversations, it was like we've always had elite guards when we've had good teams. Like there's the era, the Larry Allen era. Then there was the Zach Martin era where they won a lot of football games. So they understand the importance in their building of having valuable resources dedicated to the guard position. And so that's why they were comfortable when they got stuck and couldn't get out, saying, well, maybe not as much value around the league here, but for us, there's tremendous value to investing in this position.
I'll even go deeper than that. I will say that so Brian Schottenheimer is the son of Marty Schottenheimer. When we were all in Kansas City, Will Shields was at one guard.
Oh, yeah.
Tim Grunnert was at another guard, and Dave Zott was at the center. And so Marty would stand in front of the room and say, it doesn't matter who we have at running back. As long as we have this interior three, we can dominate anybody. And when I'm looking at the Cowboys and what they're creating, DJ, they're creating dominant interior three where they can just run the ball at whomever. And we always talk about build your team to win your division. Jalen Carter plays where? Three technique. Oh, you better have some people that are okay making this a bit of a street fight at the point of attack in the middle.
Yeah, I'm sure they've seen each other over the years too. Alabama, Georgia games going back.
I can't wait to see that one. That's going
to be fun. Last one, again, not comparing to the Hall of Famer, but Malachi Starks, Ed Reed, just in terms of the body type, fluid, smooth movers who are incredibly football smart. So I think that's kind of I think that helped inform the Ravens' love for a guy like Malachi Starks.
I 100% am all on board on that, DJ, because the thing that I think about is his IQ. And during the process, we talked about Malachi Starks and all the IQ stuff and what he did. To me, that's what it is. It's the high IQ stuff that will allow him to play as a nice playmate to Kyle Hamilton to make a ton of plays in the middle of the field.
All right, last thing here, because that's it for those comps here, and I'll hit you on one more thing, and then we're going to bounce out of here. But we talked so much about the edge and the DTs, so I'm gonna go through the top 5 or 6 guys at each position, and just tell me the like value / fit that you love the best, okay? Because we talked about this, the strength of this draft being the D lineman. So the DTs, Mason Graham. He goes 5 to the Cleveland Browns. Kenneth Grant, earlier than a lot of people thought, 13 to the Miami Dolphins. Walter Nolan at Ole Miss at D tackle. He goes 16 to the Cardinals. Derek Harmon goes 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then Tyleik Williams, he goes 28 to the Detroit Lions from Ohio State. So which one of those to me you like the best in terms of the fit, value, all that good stuff?
Well, obviously I love Mason Graham, but I'm going to say Walter Nolan. And I'm going to say, DJ, that the more that I looked at Walter Nolan late, the more I liked him. And what the Arizona Cardinals are doing in terms of being able to put him on the inside. And look, they went with pretty much all Big Ten draft, right? Like they get a bunch of kids from the Big Ten and they invest in it. But Walter Nolan is the guy that is the outlier because he comes from the SEC. But look, man, you talk about a guy that was the former #1 recruit in high school. He bounces around, but then at Ole Miss, man, you see the flashes of dominance. And I just believe, man, in the right system, the right environment, he is going to be a dominant player at the point of attack. So to me, I love that pick. I love that fit.
All right, that's a good one. I'm going to actually go Derek Harmon with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we had Mike Tomlin on. I don't know if you get a chance to see this little
I didn't
chat
see
you
it.
had
I
with
didn't
him.
get a chance to see it.
So this was the question I asked, and I didn't mention the stat, but they lost to Baltimore in the playoffs. Baltimore rushed for 299 yards in that game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I said, defense, the pride you have in that unit. I said, when you walked off the field, like how long before you started thinking about what you needed to do to revamp this defense so that something like that would never happen again? And Tomlin just looked straight into the camera and said, before I got in the shower. That was like, I'm telling you, man, there's pride there. So what do? You go out and get Derek Harmon, who can be a dominant player against the run. You go out and get Jack Sawyer, who is a rugged edge setter. Think about I was looking at their depth chart, Buck. They're going to run out there with TJ Watt and Highsmith as their starters, right? Now they've got Herbig and Jack Sawyer. That's a 3 and a 4 edge rushers. Like that is, they're going to be able to roll those guys through, keep everybody fresh. But then Y.A. Black out of Iowa, who's massive. Like they didn't like that very much, the way that went down last year. And they've kind of rebuilt and refortified and got younger across their front. So I like that value. I like that fit. I think Derek Harmon's a really, really good player.
Look, and we talked about him as we were running up to the draft about how good he is and how impactful he could be at the point of attack. And the thing that I love about the Steelers is not only taking like a Derek Harmon, right? I feel like these teams that traditionally draft well, they have a clear understanding of their brand. So DJ, they get him at a point of attack. He's a dominant player. And then they come and get Jack Sawyer. I was like, man, I should have known that they would get Jack. Do they not take every former Ohio State outside linebacker, defensive end? Like, they always do it because it always fits what they want to do. And look, man, Harmon is a good player. I love the effort and energy. He has a toughness to him that certainly fits how they want to play. Man, it's funny that you said Tomlin said that because I think at the end of the day, especially the way Baltimore put their hands on him. Yeah, it's not good enough.
All right, let's go to the edge guys here. Abdul Carter, he goes 3 to the Giants. Mykel Williams goes 11 to the San Francisco 49ers, which, by the way, the Niners took a bunch of run stoppers, which is kind of fascinating because we think about them as like, wide 9 attack fronts. Like they took a bunch of guys who were kind of dominant edge setting guys. I think that's a little bit of a byproduct of the Rams and their physicality and kind of how they want to play. So I thought that was fascinating. Shamar Stewart was 17 to the Bengals. Jalen Walker right before that, 15 to Atlanta. And then James Pierce, they come back in. The Falcons select him with their second first-round pick, parting with next year's 1, which is kind of a little bit of a shocker. And then the last one I'll give you here, Donovan Izaraku in the second round to the Dallas Cowboys. What do you like the best?
Man, as much as I love Pierce as a player, I like Izaraku going to the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
And the reason why is I just think about that defense. Fluke's coming back to Dallas. Like they can play with urgent athletes on the edge. Izaraku, just man, his pace, his tempo, the vast array of moves that he has. I would say that he probably needs to cut it down so he can kind of master what he wants to do at the next level. But man, I just can see him and Michael Parsons kind of engaging in various games and doing things from stand-up positions to create all kinds of problems for offenses on third downs.
I was actually going to go in that direction. So I'm going to go in a different direction here and ask you a question. If I told you next year, like let's look, the first round guys are Abdul Carter, Mykel Williams, Jalen Walker, Shamar Stewart, James Pierce, those 5 guys, right? Those 5 first rounders. If I told you that after the year next year, that the second rounders, which is Izaraku, JT Tuimoloau, Nick Scorton, Oladejo, he goes to the Titans, Mike Green. If I told you that's 5v5, if I told you next year, Buck, the season ends and the second rounders end up having more sacks than the first rounders, what would you say?
I wouldn't be surprised because I think they're set up for success given where they're going. We always talk about the importance of fit and where you go. Mike Green going to the Baltimore Ravens. Look out. My goodness. You know what I'm saying? Like that is one that I'm sure no one could envision. He's going to be there. And then you talk about Azaraku and some of the other guys in the second round. They're better positioned to kind of feast off teams that are having to chase points. Mike Green is going to have more opportunities to get after the passer than maybe an Abdul Carter or some of these other guys. And so I just think the fit and the opportunities are going to be better for the second rounders.
We talked about the second round being the sweet spot for these rushers. And these rushers that I mentioned in the second round, almost all of them have big production. Like they know how to rush. Like they're going to show up and be ready to rush the passer. Whereas some of the traitsy guys in the first round, that might be more for 2-3 years from now. So I'd be curious. That wouldn't shock me in the least if that second round group ended up being better, at least initially.
It wouldn't. And DJ, let's be honest, like so many of the pass rushers that emerge and become guys are guys that are not taken in the first round. I mean, we've just seen pass rush position is just different in terms of where guys pop. It's a lot about where you play, what scheme you're playing, and how you deploy. Those second round guys are going to have opportunities to play to their strengths, but they're playing on teams that are good that will set them up for chances where some of these other teams, not the same thing. It's a huge weakness, and you're going to be counted on to be an every down player, where some of the second round guys are going to be in that designated pass rusher role, which is so much different than being an every down run and pass stopper.
Yep. It'll be fun to watch all these guys, man. All right. This is fun. It was great to be back together and catch up, Buck. Again, thanks to everybody for hanging with us as we've gone through this entire draft process. We'll have more shows coming your way. I'm gonna crawl under a rock for a little bit, Buck. Take a little break, and then we'll be back at it. But I'm excited now. We have teams. Now we can start digging into what this is going to look like next year. We've got the schedule release that's right around the corner. The NFL never sleeps, man.
Never sleeps, and it's such a great thing. The schedule release is the 14th. You got OTAs and mini camps. You're gonna have a month off, and then before you know it, we're gonna be in July, and it's on and popping.
No, 100%. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time right here on Move the Sticks.